Hello, my dear friends. I'm Dr. Vaishali Bharambe. I've been teaching anatomy for more than 25 years and I love it. Today, we are going to be discussing anorectal surgeries, developmental and anatomical perspective. I'm an anatomist who's genuinely believed for a long time that we anatomists need to breach the gap between the door of the anatomy department and the door of the surgery department by discussing surgical anatomy. So I'm hoping to fill in this gap through this series of surgical anatomy lectures. I hope this helps you. If not, also please give me a feedback. Right. So let's begin. So surgical anatomy series. Who is going to benefit from this series? Any first MBBS student? A third MBBS student studying surgery? A student who is doing post-graduation in surgery, ENT, ophthalmology, obstetrics and gynec also. Any specialist in the field of surgery would benefit from this lecture series called Surgical Anatomy. Remember that if you like the lecture, then the notes are present on the VB Anatomy website in the form of handouts. You can go there and regularly go through the entire lecture in handout formats. So let's begin this anorectal surgeries, developmental and anatomical perspective. How is this lecture planned? First, I'll discuss the development of rectum and anal canal in brief, then the anatomy of rectum, then the anatomy of anal canal, along with discussion of venous drainage, hemorrhoids, fistulas, anatomy. Throughout, I'll be presenting surgical anatomy as and when it is relevant. So let's discuss development of rectum and anal canal first. So let's ask ourselves a potential situation where a female infant was born with a small dimple where the anus should be. Okay. When examined, her vagina showed presence of meconium. Radiographic exploration showed that there was a tiny little tract communicating the vagina backwards. So the question is, with which part of the lower bowel would the fistula probably be connected? We can see that it is connected to the rectum from the image. Can you name this birth defect? Yes, we know that it is rectovaginal fistula. But what is the embryological basis for this condition? Why did this happen? So to understand that, let's understand the development. So now let's imagine that there is a developing embryo and we know that there is a hindgut part of the developing embryo which is reaching the surface at the cloacal membrane. Yes, you're finding it difficult to imagine. Let's add some more information now. Okay. Posterior intestinal portal. So the part of what is hindgut? The part of the gut tube beyond the posterior intestinal portal is called as the hindgut. Hindgut is a midline structure which is held attached to the posterior wall with the help of posterior primitive dorsal mesentery, which contains the inferior mesenteric artery, which is the artery of hindgut. All this is very difficult to read, but very easy to understand if you use images. I always say that images help you to imagine, and anatomy is about visualization. So visualize. So I want you to bring your attention to this hindgut. See, this is the gut tube, foregut, midgut, and now this is the hindgut. Everything beyond the posterior intestinal portal. What is posterior intestinal portal? It's the junction of the right 2/3 and left 1/3 of the transverse colon in the adult. Okay. Now you can see this green colored dorsal mesentery which is attaching the gut tube to the dorsal wall. Here is your dorsal aorta giving rise to inferior mesenteric artery, which is the artery of hindgut. And finally, this hindgut touches the surface of the ectoderm at a bilaminar membrane called the cloacal membrane. See, remember, there is no mesoderm between the two layers at the cloacal membrane. And here is the allantois. Allantois is a diverticulum of the hindgut, which is entering into the umbilicus at this point. Now, this is the anatomy you should know. Everything else is very easy. Okay. So, we've got these. Now, you can see the focus on the allantois. And as you focus on it, you can see that at the point where the allantois is attached to the hindgut can be divided into two parts, a pre-allantoic part and a post-allantoic part. Okay. So, question is, what develops from pre-allantoic hindgut? The part of the large intestine at the beyond the posterior intestinal portal, that means the left 1/3 of transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, till the middle rectal valve. Now, what is middle rectal valve? We will come to that later. Okay, so till the middle rectal valve, all this develops from the pre-allantoic part of hindgut. That means it is all endodermal and from pre-allantoic part of hindgut. Now let's talk about what develops from the post-allantoic part. So from the post-allantoic part, the rest of the gut should develop, but actually it's a little different. The rest of the rectum below the middle rectal valve, upper part of anal canal, and surprisingly the urinary bladder. Okay, so how come the gut tube is giving rise to the endoderm of urinary bladder? Let's understand this. Okay, how? So now this post-allantoic part of the hindgut dilates to form an endodermal cloaca. Okay, and it's reaching the surface here at the cloacal membrane. So you have a cloaca and you have a cloacal membrane. Okay, right. Now at this point I want to draw your focus to the fact that in this embryo the cloacal membrane is facing forwards. Okay, with time this cloacal membrane will start to face slightly downwards and then completely downwards. Remember, your cloacal membrane is actually going to form the perineal floor. You don't want it facing forwards. You want it facing downwards. For that, this portion elongates to form the lower abdominal wall. So now, the cloacal membrane is in its right position. You have an endodermal cloaca. Okay. So now what happens? Not only the cloacal membrane is facing downwards, it slowly begins to form a little depression. This depression is called as ectodermal cloaca. Okay, so what do we have? Here is the ectodermal cloaca. So now, this is the endodermal cloaca dilated. This is the bilaminar cloacal membrane. And this here is the ectodermal cloaca. These are the three things I want you to focus on, remembering that anteriorly there is attachment of allantois. Now what happens? Now there will be development of a urorectal septum. Let's understand how that happens. This is our endodermal cloaca. Here, between that and the allantois, a septum begins to grow downwards, which is called as the urorectal septum. It grows further down, and it further grows down to fuse with the cloacal membrane. As it fuses with the cloacal membrane, it divides your endodermal cloaca into two tubes, one tube to two tubes. Primitive urogenital sinus anteriorly, which will contribute to formation of the bladder, and the primitive rectum, which will then form the rest of the gut tube. So what is cloacal duct? This is very important. So let's understand that. The point, this is primitive urogenital sinus, this is primitive rectum. For a short while, they communicate with each other till the urogenital septum fuses down. This communication is called as cloacal duct. Why did I say it was relevant? I said it was relevant because if the cloacal duct did not obliterate, then you would have fistulas. Rectum communicating with urethra, with vagina, whatever. But the cloacal duct has to be obliterated by the descending urogenital septum. Right. Remember one thing, urogenital septum is having three elements to it. It's not just a vertical segment. It has a vertical segment and two lateral segments. Okay. So here you can see the vertical segment descending down, and from the side the two lateral segments. Now this side is a transverse section. Okay. So you can see the lateral segments moving inwards, moving further inwards, dividing the endodermal cloaca into the primitive urogenital sinus ventrally and primitive rectum dorsally. Also, if you look carefully, you can see the paramesonephric ducts in the lateral septa. Do you know what they develop into? Yes, they fuse to form the uterus. So if this is in the female, they are going to form the uterus, which therefore will be existing between the urinary bladder in the front and the rectum behind. I hope you love this as much as I do. So now, we've divided the endodermal cloaca into two tubes, right? So now it's time to divide the cloacal membrane into two parts. So this urorectal septum descends down, fuses with the cloacal membrane. So the membrane in front of it is now the urogenital membrane. The membrane behind it is the anal membrane. So cloacal membrane has been divided. So what about ectodermal cloaca? That too must divide. So now the ectodermal cloaca also gets divided into a ventrally placed primitive urethral groove and a dorsally placed proctodium or the anal pit. So we have a primitive rectum, a proctodium or anal pit separated by an anal membrane. Finally, we have the characteristics or the characters who are going to develop to form rectum anal canal. So let's see how quickly it forms now, okay? So here you're seeing endodermal cloaca, here you're seeing anal membrane, and here you're seeing the proctodium. What will happen now? The proctodium deepens. The anal membrane ruptures, okay? And finally, the point where this anal membrane ruptures is represented by the crenated pectinate line. The post-allantoic hindgut now communicates with the proctodium and a rectum and anal canal gets formed such that endodermal cloaca formed the anal canal and rectum above the pectinate line. Proctodium formed the anal canal below the pectinate line. Therefore, the part above is endodermal, the part below is ectodermal. So finally, development can be summarized as the part of anal canal above the pectinate line comes from the endodermal hindgut. Part of the anal canal below the pectinate line comes from ectodermal proctodium. The line where they both meet is the pectinate line. I want all of you students and senior faculty to all correlate this development with the blood supply, nerve supply and so on, such that this part above the pectinate line, superior part of anal canal, is supplied by superior rectal artery, branch of inferior mesenteric artery, which is the artery of hindgut. It is drained by superior rectal vein, which drains into inferior mesenteric vein, into the portal circulation. Lymphatic drainage is to inferior mesenteric lymph nodes, and nerve supply is nerve supply of the gut, that is the autonomic nervous system. Where is the inferior part of anal canal? Part below the pectinate line is supplied by inferior rectal arteries, which are branches of internal pudendal artery, drained by inferior rectal vein into inferior vena cava. Finally, drainage, lymphatic drainage into superficial inguinal lymph nodes, and nerve supplies by inferior rectal nerve. This area, therefore, it's not autonomic nerve supply and is therefore very sensitive to pain. Okay, so this is how you bring your knowledge of anatomy development into your clinical practice by understanding these relevant points based on their development. The surgical importance also exists because the tumors which come from the pectinate part above pectinate line will finally lead to metastasis to the liver. The tumors that appear below the anal, below the pectinate line finally metastasize to the lungs. This is because they are the meds are passing through the systemic circulation, through the inferior vena cava. Okay, whereas here they are traveling through portal circulation and therefore they will reach the liver and metastasize there. Right. So some anomalies maybe which we will be able to see. So here you're seeing that the proctodium did develop, but there is a severe anal stenosis. The anal canal is having a very narrow opening. Here you're seeing a persistent anal membrane. So the anal membrane did not rupture. So it might look bluish and you can see that there is some cavity beyond it, but the anal membrane has not ruptured. Here you're seeing a anoperineal fistula. There is an anal pit, okay, but the proctodium has not developed, it has not deepened inwards. So the rectum has opened on some other point on the perineum. This is anoperineal fistula. So Whenever you find that there is a fistula which is high, okay, it's likely to be a vertical element disorder. When you see that the fistula is low, it's likely to be a lateral element disorder. For example, here you're seeing a recto-urethral fistula. Here you're seeing a recto-vaginal fistula. They are both low disorders, okay? And therefore, they are likely to be lateral element. Doesn't matter. Just remember that they are urorectal septum disorders, and at the same time, the proctodeum has not deepened at all to form the lower anal canal. Here you're seeing a case of rectal atresia, where the lower part of rectum has not developed. This is likely to be poor blood supply, it can be lack of recanalization, and so on. Finally, Hirschsprung's disease. This is a disease condition wherein the nerve plexus in a part of the intestine does not develop. So when the food, whatever is the material in the GIT, reaches that point, it's unable to move forwards due to lack of peristalsis there. So the gut tube above it becomes dilated. The condition is called Hirschsprung's disease. So now let's come to the same question with which we started this discussion. So what is the embryological basis for this condition, which is the recto-vaginal fistula, right? So the possible embryological understanding is lack of development of urorectal septum, specifically the lateral elements, because of which now there is the cloacal duct portion has persisted, and therefore the rectum remains in communication with the developing vagina. Okay. So this is how we understand the development to explain what we see in clinical practice. Pause, drink some water or maybe coffee, and we will move on to the next part of today's discussion. So let's go to gross anatomy of rectum and anal canal. So this is, we know, the rectum, which means a straight tube, but of course in humans it is not a straight tube, it's a misnomer. Okay. And it extends downwards from the rectosigmoid junction to the point where it passes through the levator ani to form the anal canal. Where is it located? It's located in front of the lower three pieces of sacrum and then the coccyx. So here you're seeing the sacrum, and this is where your rectum is. So just study the wall for a minute. Here is the obturator internus part of the pelvis. Attach the levator ani to it. So here's your pelvic diaphragm, and then you can see how the rectum is passing through it, held in place by the two slings of puborectalis muscle. I want you to note this. See, here's the rectum. It's moving forward happily till the sling of puborectalis pulls it forwards, and that's why your rectum has got a S-shaped curve to it. Okay? Right. So let's continue to discuss this. Rectum is located S3 and below to a point which is about 2 to 3 centimeter below and in front of the coccyx. So that's the distance of your rectum. It's devoid of tinea, cola, it's devoid of saculations, it's devoid of appendices, epiploikium. Measures about 13 centimeters to 4 centimeters in width, and in the lower part it's slightly dilated to form a rectal ampulla. Okay, most of the time it remains closed and remains as an anteroposterior slit. It has got anteroposterior curvatures and side-to-side curvatures. So here you are seeing a sacral curvature and a perineal curvature. Of course, like I said, these curvatures are because of the rectalis muscle winding around the rectum. Now you're coming to the side-to-side curvatures. There are two curvatures on the right, upper and lower, and one on the left, which is the middle. The rectum is covered by peritoneum. Okay, a part of it is covered by peritoneum, a part of it is non-peritoneal. So you can see how the peritoneum is gently curving over the upper part and the middle part of rectum. So upper 1/3 is covered anteriorly and on the sides by peritoneum. Middle 1/3 is covered only in the front by peritoneum, and lower part remains non-peritoneal. Okay. In the male, the peritoneum helps to create a rectovesical pouch. In the female, it creates a uterine pouch of ductless. In the male non-peritoneal, the part below the peritoneum shows presence of a thickened fascia called rectovesical fascia of Denon Villiers. Now here remember, this is a firm fascia that tries to prevent easy spread of cancer through it. In the female, a similar fascia called rectovaginal fascia exists here. Posteriorly, the rectum is related to a lot of midline structures and on the sides. So in the midline, you will find the ganglion impar, the lower 2.5 vertebrae of sacrum, median sacral vessels, superior rectal artery. In the lower part, you will find fascia of Valdeia and the coccygeal raphe here. Okay, what is fascia of Valdeia? It's a dense connective tissue through which pass your superior rectal vessels, connecting the lower part of sacrum to the anorectal junction. On the side, the rectum will be related to muscles like piriformis, coccygeus, libetaini, some blood vessels like lateral sacral, and important nerves, the sympathetic chain and the pelvic splanchnic nerves, which finally come and supply the rectum as well as anal canal. On the sides, okay, so you saw what it was related to anteriorly and posteriorly, but on the sides, what is it related to? In the upper part, related to pararectal fossa. In the middle part, related to pelvirectal space. This space contains important lateral ligaments of rectum which carry middle rectal vessels. So see how connective tissue is being used to bring blood vessels to the rectum. And in the lower part here on either side, the rectum and anal canal are supported by the ischiorectal fossa. So we come to a question, what is mesorectum? So now mesorectum actually is not the mesentery of rectum because mesorectum does not have a mesentery, but it's a fatty tissue that surrounds the rectum containing blood vessels and lymph nodes. It's a distal continuation of the tissue of the mesosigmoid. It ends at the level of the pelvic floor, you can see it here. In the upper part, it just encloses the rectum from the side and the front. In the lower part, it forms a little collar of connective tissue completely surrounding the rectum. This is a terminology used by surgeons for dissecting in the region around the rectum. So they say dissection in the mesorectum. So wall of rectum, what is it made up of? It's gut tube. It's made of the same 4 layers: mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, serosa, MS. Okay. So let's talk about the mucosa first. The mucosa, actually the rectum shows mucus folds. Okay. These folds are temporary and permanent. Temporary are longitudinal folds which will be lost in the presence of fecal matter. Horizontal, okay, however, are permanent folds called as Houston's valves. So each Houston's valve is a horizontal semilunar fold containing mucous membrane, underlying submucosa, and a bit of circular muscle also. They are permanent folds. How many? First, third are constant. Second, fourth, comparatively inconstant. Total 4. So the first and the third, they come from the right wall. Okay. The first is present almost at the rectosigmoid junction, but the third one is present somewhat in between. It's the largest and the most important of the valves. It appears from the anterior and the right side. Remember, this is important. Sometimes it forms a complete circle of fold, which is called as a Neliton sphincter. What does it do? It helps to developmentally divide your rectum. Remember, middle rectal valve, part above pre-allantoic hindgut, part below post-allantoic hindgut. But it functions as a chamber for holding the fecal matter, okay, supporting the column of feces without initiation of defecation. If the fecal matter passes into the lower chamber, there is spontaneous defecation. The second and the fourth folds are 2.5 cm above and below the Houston's valve, third Houston's valve. Now, why are we discussing this? What is the need for it? The need is that if you're putting in a cannula for rectal washing, you must have the patient in the left lateral position Okay, and your tube must be passed very gently to not damage the middle rectal valve, which is in the right anterior position. Okay, right. So if you are doing a per rectal examination, what will you find in a patient? Okay, so here's your finger, gloved finger, and what will you feel in a male? Here's your gloved finger, what will you feel in a female and why? So in a male, you can feel the prostate gland, the seminal vesicles, you can feel the puborectal sling, and the rectum and sacrum and the perianal region. In the female, you can use this as an adjunct to examine the cervix, uterus, vagina, and of course everything else that we did in the males as well. So in the rectal examination, the male is used as an early detection tool for prostatic enlargements, and of course to detect rectal cancers, polyps, and other rectal conditions. In the female, it's used as an adjunct. Complementary pelvic examination is done through the per-rectal examination. So we continue to discuss the wall of rectum. We still have to discuss submucosa and muscularis externa. But before that, let's quickly ask ourselves, a somewhat vertical tube with a few curvatures, how does it stay in place? The rectum has got a lot of supports. One of the most important supports is the puborectal ring. Remember, there is a sling of puborectalis. We saw it right in the beginning of the class. From behind, there is the fascia of Valdia. From the side, there are lateral ligaments of rectum. In front, there is the rectovesical fascia of Denone. The peritoneum, the blood vessels that come to rectum, the perineal body, everybody supports the rectum. But if you lose the puborectal sling, for some reason puborectal sling is damaged, it will result in partial or complete prolapse of the rectum. Take a look. In this case, you can see the mucosa and submucosa protruding out of the anal canal. In this case, even the muscle is protruding out. So this is incomplete and this is complete prolapse of rectum. So with this bit of introduction to the rectum anatomy, let's move on to the anal canal. So anal canal is the lowermost part of the alimentary tube, extending from the lower end of rectum to the anal orifice. It extends from that 0.2 to 3 centimeter below the tip of coccyx to the anal orifice, which is 4 centimeter below and in front of the coccyx. You can see that anal canal is quite a short structure. It has some peculiarities. It is closed all the time except for purpose of defecation. It is surrounded by sphincter ani muscles and it is a non-peritoneal structure, barely 3.8 centimeter in length. It's related in front to the perineal body, behind to the anococcygeal body, on each side to the ischiorectal fossa as seen here. So it's quite well supported from all sides. Friends, if you are enjoying this lecture, do like and subscribe to my channel. It will encourage me to make more of such informative lectures. So now is the time when all of you should be getting your color pencils. I know you feel like a small kid, but believe me, I personally, even at this age, learn by drawing. So it really helps because it keeps you entirely occupied. So now let's see if you can draw the rectum and anal canal, and on the side here are the ischial walls, okay? Lined by the obturator internus covered by fascia. Here's the levator ani now coming in, forming the pelvic diaphragm through which the rectum is passing. On either side, the rectum anal canal is supported by the ischiorectal fossae. And now let's divide the anal canal with the help of two lines, the pectinate line and the Hilton's white line, dividing the anal canal into upper, intermediate and lower parts, each being 15 millimeter and the lowermost part being 8 millimeter. So we've got our basics in place. We still have to have the sphincters. So now remember, your gut tube is always having two layers, an inner circular and outer longitudinal. So this inner circular layer of rectum and anal canal thickens to form the sphincter ani internus, which is an involuntary smooth muscle. Okay, about 2.5 centimeter long and 2 to 5 millimeters in thickness. This is surrounded by sphincter ani externus. okay, divided into deep superficial and subcutaneous groups, actually looks like a single muscle. It's a skeletal muscle which is voluntary, supplied by inferior rectal nerve and S4 nerve. And in between them, remember, there's an intersphincteric space which is often explored by surgeons in various surgeries. The upper part of internal sphincter, the deep part of external sphincter, along with the puborectalis. See, here's the puborectalis, here's the deep part, and in the wall is the internal sphincter. Together they form the anorectal ring. So here's your anorectal ring. And if this ring is damaged, it will lead to fecal incontinence. You saw the inner circular layer forming sphincter ani internis. What happened to the outer longitudinal layer? The outer longitudinal layer descended down, joined with the levator ani muscle to form a conjoined fibroelastic sheath. This sheath descends down, splits, and gets attached to the skin or passing through the subcutaneous sphincter ani externis to form corrugator cutis ani muscle. It attaches itself to the Hilton's white line, forming the anal intermuscular septum. This longitudinal muscle is said to provide pathways for spread of perianal infections. Now let's come deep to the submucosal layer. Okay, so we've done the muscle. In the submucosa, you find there are two plexuses, an internal venous plexus and an external venous plexus. And these plexuses drain via veins in varying directions. The upper part of the internal venous plexus drains via superior rectal veins. The middle part into middle rectal vein and inferior part into the inferior rectal vein, so the external part. Remember that the internal and external plexus are in communication with each other. So you find that the superior rectal vein drains into portal system, the middle and inferior rectal veins drain into inferior vena cava, and therefore your internal venous plexus here becomes the site where the portal and the cable blood vessels meet, a site of portocaval anastomosis. This lot of blood vessels which are found in the wall of the rectum, okay, in the form of a ring, form what is called as annulus hemorrhoidalis. So let's now understand a little bit more about the wall of anal canal and discuss a little bit about hemorrhoids or piles. So, upper part of the anal canal is about 15 millimeters in length. It's limited below by the pectinate line. The wall of it shows presence of such longitudinal columns which are called as anal columns. These are called anal columns of Morgagni. They contain radicals of superior rectal veins. You have to imagine that inside them there are superior rectal veins. What are anal cushions? These are parts of the mucosa which are containing core of connective tissue, containing a lot of blood vessels, which come inwards and help in the fecal continence. They form something like a seal. Okay, they're a very important part of fecal continence mechanism. These superior rectal veins, in the presence of portal hypertension, can become dilated. Some veins getting dilated before others. Those veins that bulge inwards first are called primary piles. They form primary piles. In which position will you get them? You get them in left lateral, right anterior, right posterior position with the patient in a lithotomy position. So let's briefly ask ourselves, what is piles or hemorrhoids? Hemorrhoids are swollen varicose veins in the rectum or anal canal. Why do they form there? Why not somewhere else? They form here specifically because they are completely going against gravity without help of valves. There are no valves here. They are piercing the wall of the rectum posteriorly so that when you put a lot of pressure, the veins get compressed here. And the portal hypertension itself is a major mechanism. So it has to push blood against portal mechanism, resulting in a lot of stasis in veins, resulting in varicosity. So let's talk about internal and external piles. So there are some piles or hemorrhoids which develop above dentate line, which are called internal hemorrhoids, which develop below dentate line are called external hemorrhoids. Internal aligned by mucous membrane, external aligned by skin. So you have pectinate line. Above it will be internal pile. Below it will be external pile. Above it lined by mucous membrane. Below it lined by skin. Above it, because there's autonomic nerve supply, it's painless. Below it, it is very painful because it's supplied by inferior rectal nerve. And all this more is information about this. You can pause the video and discuss, some of which is more clinical than anatomical. If you're enjoying this lecture, do like and subscribe to my channel. It will help me to encourage me to create more of such informative lectures. Continuing our discussion of the upper part of anal canal, you saw anal columns of Morgagni. Now they are joined below by horizontal lines which are called anal valves of Moll. Together they form the pectinate line. There are also anal papillae, anal sinuses. What are these? Let's take a look. So this is the anal valve that you just understood. The space of the depression above it is called anal sinus, into which you can clearly see an anal gland opening. So there are glands in the submucosa in the anal canal which are draining into the lumen. So these anal glands are relevant because they can get infected and are a major cause of anal fistulas. This region is having an autonomic nerve supply. So what is an anal fistula? Anal fistula is an abnormal tunnel that gets formed such that it connects the lumen of the anal canal to the surface of the skin of buttock. You can see it here. Connecting the lumen to the surface of the skin. It's a tract. Okay. So most of the anal fistulas are in reaction to anorectal abscesses bursting on the surface. What are the types of anal fistulas? Let's understand this. Here's your sphincter ani internus, here's the sphincter ani externus. Okay, this way here is the puborectalis muscle. So you can have a submucosal, you can have intersphincteric, transsphincteric. Try and use the image to get the idea about these in your mind. Suprasphincteric and extrasphincteric parts. Also, these are different types of fistulas. Let's discuss them in brief. This intersphincteric here connects inwards into the anal canal, passes through and in between the sphincters to open on the surface. This is the most common type of fistula. Then you have a transsphincteric. Okay, so it's going to pass through both the sphincters, connecting again the lumen to the surface. It extends and passes through the ischiorectal fossa. Then you have suprasphincteric. So it not only passes through the sphincters, but ascends up and passes through the puborectalis muscle and then descends downwards to the perianal skin. So the tract is somewhat horseshoe shaped. Then let's talk about extrasphincteric. This one does not bother about the sphincters at all. It communicates the anal lumen above through the sphincter muscles down to the surface. This is extrasphincteric. And you have something called submucosal, which does not touch the sphincters at all. It passes through the mucous membrane and submucosa to communicate the lumen to the skin on the surface. So you saw fistulas, you saw hemorrhoids, but we've discussed the anal canal only till the pectinate line. Let's understand why is this pectinate line so discussed. It is situated at the junction of upper and the middle part of anal canal. It's a mucocutaneous junction, developmentally the junction between the endodermal and ectodermal parts of anal canal. It is important because it's a watershed line. Everything above is draining upwards into the inferior mesenteric vein, portal vein, or getting supply from the gut. Nerve supply autonomic, lymphatic drainage upwards. And remember, because it is comparatively less sensitive, it is this area in which you can put in a needle in a non-anesthetized patient for treatment of some hemorrhoid. Whereas, okay, so the middle part called as the pecten is bluish pink and it has somatic nerve supply. The part above is plum red. The part below is bluish pink. Okay, this one. And it is limited below by the Hilton's line or called as the Hilton's white line. Here you see a lot of color contrast between the lumen and the external skin. It's the point where the anal endomuscular septum is attached and it's the lower end of internal anal sphincter. Surgical importance is that ischiorectal abscesses open below the Hilton's line. Lowermost part is barely 8 mm. The skin here is brown to black. It's getting a somatic nerve supply, and you can see the skin around it much folded because of the corrugator cutis ani muscle that got formed because of attachment of the longitudinal muscle of rectum and anal canal to the skin. We've discussed this earlier. This one. So finally, just one last few lines here. The epithelium also varies. The part above pectinate line is simple columnar. Below it, stratified squamous, non-keratinized, no sweat glands, no hair. But the last part is pure skin, stratified squamous, keratinized epithelium with the necessary glands and hair. So, arterial supply to rectum anal canal best understood in one go. It's supplied by the superior rectal artery, which divides as it enters into one left and two right arteries, right anterior, right posterior. The middle part gets supplied by middle rectal, lower part gets supplied by inferior rectal branch of internal pudendal artery. Nerve supply, like I said above, is by sympathetic and parasympathetic, below is by somatic. Sympathetic usually maintains continence. Parasympathetic facilitates defecation. Lymphatic drainage, the upper part drains into inferior mesenteric lymph nodes. Middle and lower part drains into the internal iliac lymph nodes, and lowermost part drains into superficial inguinal lymph nodes. Anal canal is surrounded by a lot of spaces which promote abscess formation. So, these spaces, subcutaneous spaces, submucosal, intersphincteric, ischioanal, okay. So, these are perianal spaces. Finally, there is a lot of variable interpretation of anal canal by different people. For example, the surgeons say that anal canal is all three parts, whereas the anatomist says that only the part below the pectinate line is the anal canal. So that's called the anatomical anal canal. And finally, the real anal canal, a lot of people say, is the first and the second part. The third part, according to them, is just the skin. So I'll leave it to you to interpret your anal canal as long as you understand it and use it well. This is what we discussed a lot today. I hope much of it was of use to you. If you enjoyed this lecture, do like and subscribe to my channel. It will encourage me to create such informative lectures. Thank you. I'll see you across the screen in the next surgical anatomy lecture.